ratification meeting. This afternoon, you'll hear about and have an opportunity to ask questions about our tentative collective agreement. As a friendly reminder, I'd like to ask everybody to keep their microphones turned off. And then when you're ready to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your virtual hand and you will be acknowledged. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda of our meeting today? Bradley, thank you. And Deborah, thank you. Are there any questions or comments about our agenda? Nothing? I see. I don't hear anything. Micheline, could you launch the poll, please?
The last few people are still voting. Okay.
The motion to approve the agenda for this afternoon is carried. Thank you. I'm pleased to inform you, our members, that both QUFA Council and Executive voted to recommend the tentative collective agreement to members for ratification. Hence, we are gathering here this afternoon to talk about this. I'd like to start by calling upon our co-chief negotiators for their report. Now, at the conclusion of their report, we will then address the motion on the table. And at that particular time, I'll open up the virtual forum for questions and discussion. Leslie and Amy.
Thanks, Les. I'm going to kick us off. So hopefully you've had a chance to see what we're talking about here today. We wrote a fairly extensive overview of changes, of the changes we negotiated, and the bargaining team is now unanimously recommending these changes to you to form the 2022-2025 Queen's QUFA Collective Agreement. We admit at the outset that not all of the changes are ideal or desirable, but negotiation requires balancing our varied interests both internally and against the employer's goals. So I hope that you've had a chance to read the thematic overview, and if you've been curious about particular wording, that you've been able to negotiate the track changes document. That illustrates concretely what words we agree to with the university. So we want to kick off the day today. We're being recorded now for this segment, but we'll stop recording after the motion so that you can, ask questions without any concern for the recording. But we want to record in case people can't make it today, and then they can hear this secondary high-level overview. So we're going to do an even higher, we did the thematic changes. What we'd like to orally present to you is an even higher level overview of the complexity of the new collective agreement, and we're organizing it as our top 10 and bottom 3. So top 10 are areas where we think we've made good progress, and bottom 3 are areas we wish we could have done more to improve. There might be more than 3, there are certainly more than 10, but Amy and I set ourselves the challenge to kind of reduce it a little bit for the sake of conversation. So we're going to share presenting these elements to you, and I would just ask if you could hold your questions until we're finished, and as I say, at which time we'll handle the motion and we will stop recording for discussion so that people feel free to speak. So I'm going to start with the top of the top 10. It's the obvious one. Salary. We negotiated a healthy set of ATBs for the next 3 years, so 3.5% retroactive to May 2022. 3% for 2023 and 3% for 2024. We'll be back at the table for 2025. As well, we increased the term adjunct-based stipends to $8,500 before the first ATB is applied. So when we look at the retroactive 2022 amount, the stipend will be about $8,797. And everyone who's been working on the lower rate will get a retroactive lump sum payment. And then finally, in terms of salary, we also agreed with the university to form a joint working group to discuss the salary model in anticipation of the next round of bargaining.
We also made some gains on expenses, stipends, and fines. Many monetary elements of the collective agreement were improved in this round, including head stipends. The minimum is raised by $1,500 per annum. PER is increased to $350 per course for term adjuncts and to $2,458 per year for other members. And there's an additional year of rollover permitted. So it's now to 3 years from 2. We also altered expenses for commuting adjuncts and increased the allowable claim in tuition support. So it's now $4,000 per year or $2,000 per term. Finally, we increased the adjunct scholarly research fund by $30,000. Now I'd like to turn to more of the top 10 that are on improved rates for specific job categories. First is librarian and archivist improvements. We negotiated a library and archives forum, which we intend to mimic the functions of faculty boards and to enhance transparency and engagement in the library and archives. Librarians and archivists are now entitled to at least 1 academic leave of 12 months over their career, up from all of them being 8 months. Just also wanted to note here that for anyone who's looking at the track changes version that we posted, 33.1.2.8 and 33.1.2.9, which are the articles that deal with librarians and archivists leaves. Some of the track changes deletions did not come through on that posted version. So if you're looking at it, the language you have is correct and what is intended, but if you want to see what it used to look like, what's been crossed out, you would need to go to our current collective agreement on the website and just compare the 2 versions. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that.
Okay, and then the other job category that I think we made significant and important improvements is for continuing adjuncts. So we expanded continuing adjuncts' rights to teaching release if they secure external funding. And this seems like a fairly small move, but I would argue it's quite significant because it enhances or it emphasizes the university's recognition and rewarding of research for a category of employees for whom they usually do not pay for research and nor do they acknowledge it. So it's a kind of step forward in that respect. As well, we shortened the time to when a continuing adjunct can apply for promotion to full professor from 12 years down to 10. And if you are successful in that promotion, you have the right to an academic leave in the first year after promotion. Previously, you had to wait, if you can believe it, 2 more years. Having already worked at least 12 years without an academic leave, you had to work even more. Okay, so I'm going to move to procedural components. 3 of our top 10 are procedural. The first is our grievance and discipline procedures. We have shortened the timeline to a step 1 meeting. This doesn't seem important until you're the one, for whom QUFA is grieving and you're waiting weeks and weeks. So we've shortened that timeline. We have now included record of suspensions in what's called our sunset clause. And that means that after 48 months, any record of a suspension will be removed from the official file, and that was already true for written reprimands. So now the only suspension or the only disciplines that stay in your file longer are far more severe ones. Then the third thing is that, and this seems technical, but it's important to us and it's important to people who are subject to disciplinary investigations. We now have access to the full investigation report without having to grieve the discipline. So, maybe a little technical, but I think from QUFA's point of view and from the point of view of members who are in these processes, it's a win. And the second of the 3 procedural elements are workload standards procedures. So the steps to create a new workload standard are clarified in the new collective agreement as well. And I know many people who've been involved in workload standard committees will appreciate this. The JCAA has committed to develop a template for units working on new workload standards. And then thirdly, in workload standards, existing ones, there's a direction now in the collective agreement, should it be ratified, that existing workload standards have to include some consideration for exceptional teaching work outside the teaching term. So this would be the kind of work you're doing to deal with student accommodations and considerations.
If you are keeping track of the numbers of our top 10, I'm now going in with number 7, still under procedural. We've made some equity-related improvements to appointments processes, and I'm just going to lay out a few places where you will find those improvements. One is guidance for members who have concerns with how the employment equity procedures are being followed when they're on appointments committee. Now that is right in the CA what to do. There's now a limit on the use of emergency appointments, which circumvent the normal appointments processes to 1 year. There's a narrowing of the unit head's ability to waive posting of term adjunct appointments. There's explicit prohibition to use appointments exceptions to circumvent employment equity provisions. Term adjunct appointment processes now mirror non-term adjunct appointment processes. So it's bringing in a lot more procedural safeguards. And finally, appointments committees can now be augmented by a member with relevant expertise if that's needed. I just also, before we move on to the next area, I also want to note here that in the posted track changes version, if you're looking at that, section 24.1.4D should have been deleted. Both parties have agreed to that, and that is part of the tentative agreement that would be deleted. But in the version you're looking at, it isn't indicated as to be deleted. So please note that that's 24.1.4D. The last 3 components of the top 10 involve general rights. The first is we have raised the profiles of activities that advance indigenization, equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, and accessibility, IEDIAA, throughout the collective agreement. And they are explicitly included in a number of places, including administrative and professional service, any evaluative process, adjuncts appointment committee processes, the abridged process for replacing librarians or archivists on leaves up to 12 months, the annual report form, the term adjunct appointment report, and RTP or RCAP processes.
All right, so the last 2, and these are again general rights. The first of the last 2, number 9, is improving privacy protection and restricting university access to member devices and data. So if you've gone into the track changes, you'll see Article 23 is substantially overhauled. So we've tried to expand its capacity to protect member privacy and data. And then last but not least, we resisted a number of problematic employer proposals, including the grant of IP in Article 16, which you heard about and commented on extensively, which we were very appreciative of. Secondly, the expansion of heads' duties with no concomitant obligation to train and support heads. I don't think you really heard about this very much. It was in our perhaps bargaining alert number 5, but the employer pushed very, very, very hard to expand the responsibility of heads. And at every turn where we pushed back with expanded support, they demurred. So eventually we got them to take back their expansion of responsibility. And then the last of the things we resisted was removal of the voluntary phase retirement plan from the CA. And I just want to be very clear here. The employer never suggested they were going to cancel the plan, at least not at this time, but they did want to take it out of the CA. And just my spidey sense is well, if you're not canceling it, leave it in. So we had to do a little tussling over that. And in the end, they agreed to leave it in. So moving to the bottom three then, there are a lot more areas that we could have made improvements. And I have to be a little cheeky. If only we could single-handedly rewrite the contract, it would be a very different beast. But I want to focus on three areas where we had strong mandates from you, the members, to make changes, and we didn't accomplish all that we wanted to. The first is in adjunct working conditions. So we fought for improved job security provisions for 8 straight months, including tabling creative alternatives right up to the last week that we were in negotiations, and inviting discussion with the employer repeatedly on where we might find common interest in this goal. We also argued that term adjuncts should get improved benefits. What we ended up bringing to you is a slight change to the terms of the specific right of reappointment and increased pay in lieu of benefits by 2%, so up from 6% to 8%.
The next area in our bottom three is retention. The university would not agree to a joint working group on recruitment and retention. We really wanted to have that joint working group, the university and QUFA members, to consider the issues you identified as key to robust recruitment and retention, particularly of members from equity deserving groups. And you had identified such issues as spousal appointments, provision of healthcare, daycare spots, and a number of other matters that you as members have unique insight into as key to good retention and recruitment at Queen's University and in Kingston. However, we were only able to move the university part of the way, and only after those 8 months of pushing on this issue. And thank you again for your support on this issue as we tried to make headway on it. Only at the very end of negotiating did we get any movement at all other than a straight no. But what we did get was 2 seats on the University Council on Anti-Racism and Equity Faculty and Staff Recruitment, Retention and Support Subcouncil. I think it's known as the FSRRS. And we also got a letter of agreement that the university will provide reports on spousal appointments to QUFA, and spousal appointments will be a standing agenda item for discussion at least once per term at the JCAA. We will need to be strong advocates in both these fora to see how much progress we can make with these arrangements, and the experience will help inform bargaining priorities for the 2025 round.
So number 3 of the bottom 3 is equitable provisions of supports across campus to reduce overwork. We tried to get a number of controls on university rights to download accommodation administrative work on members, and to control for their ability to increase member workload by the constant complication of members' working lives with technological solutions. We weren't very successful here, though we have a commitment to talk meaningfully about new IT at the JCAA on a regular basis, and to include a QUFA member on the university-wide Student Accommodations Review Group. It should be noted that Vice President Sella Olmsted has joined this group, but she's the only faculty member on it.
So those are our top 10 and bottom 3. And I would just like to wrap up, Leslie, in my presentation by thanking the whole of the bargaining team for their commitment, their creativity, their humor, and hard work over these past 10 months. Please join us in thanking Jillian Atkinson, James Stotts, Aicha Tomac, Awet Weldemichael, Micheline Waring, and JR, John Rose. As well, we are deeply grateful for the support of the executive committee, and particularly for the sympathetic ears of the presidents, Jordan Morelli, Sella Olmsted, and Elizabeth Hansen. Valerie Bartlett, our treasurer, made sure QUFA was well-resourced to stand firm when we needed to. We wouldn't have moved as far as we did without the hard work of the Job Action Committee led by Amanda Ross-White and supported by Elizabeth Polnicki. We are grateful to all of those people who formed subcommittees of job action and created the public pressure campaigns and participated in them. You made QUFA's support for our proposals material to the university. Finally, all the members who answered surveys or participated in working groups to create the 2022 mandate deserve our big collective thanks. We hope as a bargaining team we've honored your work in some fashion with this tentative agreement. And now I think we could stop recording and we could open discussion and Q&A.